Good morning, Nova Nation. Happy Thursday, and welcome into another episode of Villanova Sports Talk. David Szczepanski alongside Stephen Cain with you, coming off of the Bone Marrow Drive broadcast yesterday. Steve, first of all, how you doing today?
Doing good, doing good. It was gorgeous walking to the WXVU studio today, and to tell you the truth, David, I was kind of bummed when Father Peter broke the news that obviously this week the weather's great, but next week it's going to go back down to the 60s. I kind of thought once when it turns to those 70, 80-degree days, you kind of think it's going to last like that forever. And again, we're not going to get any really cold days from here on out, but it's really nice. 80-plus degrees, perfect weather.
What's funny about that is I did find out the same thing, that it was going to be cold next week from Father Peter. So maybe he's also a
Cold.
meteorologist. Cold, yes.
Yeah,
Tuesday,
but
I think in the 50s again.
okay, yeah.
But
Okay.
it's a beautiful day, beautiful week. And great to be here with you again on WXVU, Villanova Sports Talk. So a lot to get to. It's transfer portal season. We'll get to men's and women's basketball transfer portal news. Much more action on the men's side of things. But we'll obviously talk about some of the breaking news from Coach Dillon yesterday from the Bone Marrow Drive broadcast. We'll also talk about some Villanova football news as well. So a lot to get to here on today's show. Of course, here on a Thursday. If you missed any of today's show, as always, you can tune in on Spotify after the show, or also on YouTube. And just speaking of the Bone Marrow Drive broadcast, yesterday was so great. Want to thank everybody who tuned in. Want to thank, of course, Steve and Ryan for hosting with me. And really was a great day. Obviously, a great initiative, a great cause. And the interviews will be posted on YouTube throughout this week. So already Coach Ferrante and Coach Talley's interview is posted on my YouTube channel, David Szczepanski Broadcasting. And you can also find it on my social media. Let's get to our three poll questions, Steve. Poll question one, which Villanova transfer portal edition are you most looking forward to seeing play? This is the men's basketball side of things. Devin Royal, the Ohio State transfer, or Kwame Evans Jr., the Oregon State transfer. Poll question two, on a scale of 1 to 5, how happy are you with Villanova men's basketball's offseason? 1 being least happy, 1 to 2, 3, which is neutral, 4 or 5. Poll question 3, which returning player on Villanova's basketball teams are you most excited to be back? Tyler Perkins, Jasmine Bascoe, Matt Hodge, or Kennedy Henry? We'll discuss that coming up over the next hour or so. Steve, we'll get started with just the two additions for Villanova. We'll obviously talk about the subtractions as well, and the Cain Lewis and Bryce Lindsay news. But we'll talk about Oregon transfer Kwame Evans Jr., who has come over from Oregon, 6'10" junior. He was a former five-star recruit coming out of high school, averaged about 14 points and 7 rebounds per game this season on a Ducks team that honestly did not play very well this year. But Evans Jr. brings a lot of size. Your initial reaction to that news earlier this week?
I think it's a good addition. We were talking about it earlier. He's a very versatile big man, 6'10", can do a lot of different things. And again, we shout out Bart Torvik a lot, and it's very useful for figuring out if your team gets somebody in the transfer portal, how good are they? And you could also filter by position. And we were kind of going back and forth with Kwame Evans Jr. Will he play the 5? This past year at Oregon in Dana Altman's system, he was a stretch 4. And as of right now, or at least when I wrote this down in preparation for the show, he was ranked as the 5th best stretch 4 in the portal. So pretty good addition for Villanova in terms of getting somebody that they need in the front court. The second best power conference stretch 4 in the portal, and you hit on it, right? 5-star recruit from Montverde Academy, which again just feels like they're a factory, just churning out NBA players left and right. And that was the expectation for Evans Jr. And then he's kind of struggled a little bit in his college career. But again, some of these stats, again, these are stretch 4 portal guys that he's being compared against, right? 17th in defensive rebounding rate, 8th in block rate, 9th and 12th in offensive and defensive box plus minus, respectively, 4th in box plus minus overall, and he's 7th in free throw rate. He's really good at shooting the 2. He can knock down his free throws, and he's very consistent against different levels of competition. Again, Bart Torvik, it breaks down the different stats, like kind of their overall composite stats, and then how they play against top 50 teams, top 100 teams. There isn't really a drop-off. With some guys, you see that they beat up on bad teams, and then they struggle against good teams. You don't really have that problem with Kwame Evans Jr., which I think is significant because you mentioned at Oregon, they just got boned by a ton of injuries. It just wasn't a great year for Dana Altman's team. And I think what's going to be really interesting is that Oregon, watching them play a couple games, I don't know why I watched them play a couple games. They really struggled.
You enjoy the game of college basketball.
Exactly. They play this very switch heavy, aggressive kind of man-to-man defense. They don't play a lot of zone, and then of course we know with Coach Willard, Villanova, they like to play this matchup zone. They like to kind of condense things and pack the paint due to the fact that they don't have a ton of size. So I'm curious to see how he kind of adapts to that. Again, it isn't football. It isn't like a cornerback is going from one team to another, and it's going from man to zone. I feel like that's more significant. Obviously, basketball, man and zone, there's more similarities in that sense, but that's really the biggest question for me. But otherwise, yeah, the numbers kind of speak for themselves. I think it's going to be a good addition. He's gotten better as a non-fouling defender, so, kind of like Duke Brennan. Duke Brennan did a really good job defending without fouling, and he's gotten better as a distributor of the ball. The three-point shooting also needs to improve. But again, it'll be interesting. Will he play the 4? Will he play the 5? We'll see. Settle down.
That was my question. I'm curious as if he will play the 5 for Villanova. But it's clear that, from this edition with Evans Jr., we'll talk about Royal coming up in a little bit, and some of the other players Villanova and its name has been attached to. There's a lot of size here, right? Kwame Evans Jr., 6'10" forward. And I think Coach Willard, I saw it on social media, but I think it's obvious, something that we've talked about after that Michigan game, and obviously Michigan now being the national champions, it is clear to see that size is so important, especially in this day and age of college basketball. And Coach Willard has really prioritized that so far through the first few weeks here of the transfer portal. And, like I said, Steve, I agree with you. I think it will be interesting to see if Evans Jr. plays the 4 or plays the 5. He's been very good, as you said, as a stretch 4 over the last, little bit for Oregon. But Villanova doesn't have a ton of size right now in its system, right? You're obviously going to bring in Royal. You expect that perhaps some more additions, so you're bolstering that area of your team in the front court. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see Evans Jr. really be the 5 for Villanova this season. And talking about the three-point shooting, yes, it hasn't been great in his career, but he took a step forward this year.
It's gotten better.
He's been a guy who was, mid-20s, high 20s in terms of, percentage from behind the arc. This season, around 31, 32%, and that will play, especially for a big man. So I think also, too, something that I'm interested about is where does Matt Hodge fit into this equation? Because you're obviously getting size. Hodge is officially returning for next season. He's not transferring. I know he'll miss some time with the ACL injury. Some people are more optimistic that he's going to come back earlier in the season in non-conference play. I tend to think it may be a little bit closer towards Big East play, just with the kind of the usual 9-month recovery time, at least for that injury, for the ACL injury. So my question really is here, Steve, is where do you think Matt Hodge really factors into this? Because he played well last year, and I know there were some criticism, and I think rightfully so, for the rebounding at times. You have to remember this was, he took pretty much a full year off from actually playing games in basketball. It wasn't his decision, but because of the waiver eligibility. But with the size you're bringing in, obviously Evans Jr. is not coming off the bench. He's going to start, and Royal is going to be in there as well, obviously. Do you think that pushes Hodge potentially back to a bench piece for Villanova? What are your takes?
For me, I'll be a little bit selfish. I think it'd be interesting to have Matt Hodge at the 3, and then Kwame
that's something
Evans
that's also
at the
been
4,
brought up. Okay,
and then you bring in some unnamed guy at the 5. Again, obviously Duke Brennan. There's some chance that he could get that additional year and come back, but let's just assume that Duke Brennan is gone. You'd have Evans at the 4. You could play Matt Hodge at the 3, and then you get some big name guy hopefully at that 5 spot, especially with how college basketball is trending with size and getting bigger, getting physical. And it'd kind of be similar to what St. John's did with Dylan Mitchell, Bryce Hopkins, and Zuby Ejiofor. I just thought that was really something that arguably changed their season in my mind. Remember when they were struggling November and December? I believe that they didn't really roll out that lineup that often, and they were about 8-5, and then that's really when the season kind of turned around the moment the calendar flipped to 2026. Not to say that if Villanova does this, it'll be the exact same thing, but I just think with Matt Hodge, he's more this stretch for maybe a really big 3 because he likes to live on the perimeter. He's a solid perimeter defender. He can obviously shoot the basketball. He can stretch the floor. So I think it kind of would fit his skill set a little bit more because you mentioned the rebounding. He's not the heaviest guy. He's not the most physical. He's gotten better at crashing the boards over the course of the season, but that was one of the biggest criticisms. And again, fittingly against St. John's in that game at Xfinity Mobile Arena in January, I just remember that was one of the biggest criticisms. Of course, besides the fact that Villanova really struggled coming out of the locker room in the second half, I think Matt Hodge just really struggled, really crashing the boards. He did get a little bit better, but I don't know. I think that's something that I would want. But of course, the bench is an option, especially since he's coming off that injury. Supposedly it is going pretty well. I'm hearing, again, unsubstantiated, claims, but, people are saying that, the crutches, that he may be off crutches soon and that it's going pretty well. And again, first few months, he's doing a good job in his recovery. But you have to think, right, October, November, Coach Willard probably wants to be gentle with him and not rush him back 100% just to prevent re-aggravating that injury. So that's really going to be the key, but I'm curious to see what Villanova does from here on out.
That's also, what I had heard in terms of Hodge potentially playing the three, and I agree with you. I think it is something that could benefit his skill set. I like the fact that they gave him almost that full season before he was injured to learn the four, and I think become a better rebounder, as you said, make strides. I'm curious to see where that factors in when you get to the actual season, and I think the biggest question for Villanova and why this is such an interesting offseason is because over the last couple of years, you've had a really guard-heavy lineup heading in to not just the offseason, but heading in out of the transfer portal. Now you have some front court depth. We'll talk about Devin Royal coming up in just a moment, but the guard, just in general, the guard position for Villanova is very thin right now, and that's going to be something that Kevin Willard really has to attack, and obviously we'll talk about the subtractions for Villanova coming up in just a little bit, but let's get to the other commit for Villanova, Ohio State transfer Devin Royal, who comes in. This was announced just a couple days ago. He was on a visit and pretty much committed instantly after that visit, very quickly after coming here to Villanova, and this news broke by Joe Tipton. Second transfer, of course, that Kevin Willard has landed this season. Last 3 years at Ohio State, he's been really durable. You talk about a guy that's got some size. He's played 96 games the last 3 years for Ohio State. Played 11 minutes per game as a freshman. He's really continued to add to that. And again, not the best three-point shooter, similar to what we were talking about with Kwame Evans Jr., but still a guy that can shoot around 50% from the field. Also a good free throw shooter, which I think is key for Villanova, especially with some of the struggles that Duke Brennan had earlier this season. He's 6'6", of course, not as tall as Kwame Evans Jr., but Royal does have some size, and he averaged around 6 rebounds per game the last couple seasons as well. But I think the main thing here for Royal is he has a very good paint presence. Like I said, he's a really good field goal shooter, really good paint shooter, and he's a solid defender as well. So I'm happy with Evans Jr. I think he's the better pickup of the two, but Devin Royal is definitely an interesting piece for this Villanova team heading into next season.
I would agree with that. But again, don't sleep on Devin Royal, 6th best wing forward in the portal when Villanova picked him up earlier this week on Monday. He's 6th in defensive points relative per game. So how many points per game does this player add or save on defense? And you think with Bart Torvik, they adjust by opponent and pace and all that. So basically, to sum it all up, he's a very solid defender, kind of like Kwame Evans Jr. You don't really see a dip in terms of the level of competition. And what I really like is he's gotten a lot better at not turning it over as much and upping his assist rate. I am maybe overselling it a little bit. We're talking about maybe just a few percentage points, and we're kind of just looking at last year, but I still think that is pretty significant as he gets older, right? Both these guys only have 1 year of eligibility, and I think with Royal making that leap last year, you just have a better chance of realizing those gains in the turnover rate, in the assist rate this year. Now that he's a little bit more mature, you kind of know what you're going to get. And again, you said it, very good 2-point shooter, free throw shooter, similar to Evans. In terms of maybe some negatives or maybe some reservations or just things that I'd like to see him improve on, in terms of rebounding, actually got a little bit worse compared to last year.
Almost a full rebound worse.
Yeah, in terms of rebounding rate, you could see it even more. And he really made a lot of his hay in the months of December through February, did some good stuff against some really good Big Ten teams. And again, the three-point shooting, kind of like with Evans Jr., you'd like to see a little bit more there. He doesn't really steal the ball a ton, and you think with how we kind of open this description about him being a wing forward, you would think, well, he's kind of a wing. He should be playing on the perimeter. You'd like to see him kind of swipe the ball from opposing perimeter players a little bit more. And again, he could get to the free throw line a little bit more. His free throw rate's pretty low. You think for Royal, I mean, you talked about it, the physicality, and that's definitely something that he has in his corner, but he should, as a result, be getting to the free throw line a little bit more and maybe block some shots. But besides that, again, former four-star recruit, he was about a top 50 guy in his class. And in terms of what he'll bring in terms of scheme from Ohio State to Villanova, this one I think will be kind of a more friendly transition for him as really Ohio State kind of played man-to-man, but they played a little bit more matchup zone than Oregon did. So it won't be kind of as foreign of a concept when he plays in Coach Willard's system. So I think it's a pretty good addition, but obviously I think the key is just getting a competent, really getting a competent five, because you just have to assume that Duke Brennan probably won't come back. But again, I think it's a solid addition. I think, again, the defensive points relative per game stat really speaks a lot to just his positioning, his rotation ability, his help defense. So I think defensively, both these guys, it'll be fun to watch them.
I think the game that really sold me, looking back at some of the highlights, was his performance against Michigan in that 71-67 loss on March 13th. Had a double-double. Royal had 13 points, 11 rebounds, an assist, also had 2 steals. Played really well in that game overall. Now, was 4 for 12 from the field, did take a good amount of shots, but hit some free throws there, hit some threes as well. And that's the thing about his three-point shooting, too. It's there. You see it at times, right? He was 2 for 4 against Michigan, 4 for 7 against Wisconsin, another really good team in February. There's some games there, 3 for 3 against UCLA, but then he also has the 0 for 3s, the 0 for 5s, the 0 for 4s. So you would like a little bit more consistency there, but again, ultimately he is a forward, a big man. And Ohio State, again, this was a team that obviously made the NCAA tournament, had a really nice season, and ultimately did lose to TCU in the first round, 66-64 on March 19th. But I like the experience he brings in, and also to credit for Coach Willard for being able to pick up a player like Royal, a guy that has stayed in Ohio pretty much his entire life. He went to Pickerington Central High School. He was named Ohio's Mr. Basketball in 2023, averaged on 20 points per game as a senior there, and then obviously went to Ohio State. He's been there the last 3 seasons, and as Steve said, he has 1 more year of eligibility remaining, averaged around 14 points and 6 rebounds per game this season. I agree with you. I want to see more consistency in terms of three-point shooting from Royal. It's there. Sometimes he chucks up a lot of shots and they don't fall. And then also to the rebounding. The fact that he took a step backwards in that, I think, is not something that's great, obviously, considering Villanova's lack of depth in the front court this season. Steve, so those are the 2 big additions. Some of the other rumors we've had, DJ Wagner was spotted on campus the other day. We'll see if that really progresses. But I think the deal that could potentially be close, at least on the list of the final 4 scores or schools, for Jake Fegan, the Cornell transfer, who a lot of people have been very impressed with Fegan. And again, coming over from a program like Cornell, has not played the best teams in his collegiate career. But Fegan, coming off of a very good campaign, taking a look at some of his highlights with Cornell. So this could be a good fit for Villanova as well. And just taking a look at some of those stats more in depth, Fegan averaged 17 points per game this season, 5 rebounds per game this season. He shot 55% from the field. And again, yes, Cornell is, again, not the best of programs when it comes to basketball, but he's made progress every year. His first season, freshman year, he played in 30 games, averaged 4 points per contest. Then in 2024-2025, he elevated that to 11 points per contest. And Steve, I think the best thing you could say about Fegan, yes, he averaged 17 points per game this season, 5 rebounds. He's a guard, which is great. Villanova needs guards. 6'4", senior from Illinois. But Steve, he's a phenomenal three-point shooter. 41.5% from behind the arc. He's gotten better as the years go on. Freshman season, 31%. Last year, 38%. This year, 41.5%. Yes, you could argue that perhaps that falls a little bit when you come to a conference like the Big East. It probably would, but he's a very good scorer, and he's impressed me, I think, when you take a look at the highlights. Again, will it transfer over to the Big East is always the big question, but he's definitely got the skill set.
He does, and it's refreshing to talk about somebody, not to totally discredit Kwame Evans and Devin Royal's offensive capabilities, but I think we were both pretty jazzed up about what they could bring in terms of rebounding, their physicality, their defense, maybe just a little bit more so than what they could do offensively. Obviously, they have some skills, the two-point shooting, the free throw shooting, but it's nice with Fegan that the offensive stuff really jumps off the page. That's kind of the selling point for him. He's the fourth best wing guard currently in the portal, according to Bart Torvik, and then 13th in offensive rating, 17th in true shooting percentage, 23rd in effective field goal percentage. So again, effective field goal percentage is taken into account, 3-point shots being worth more difficult to make than twos, and true shooting percentage accounting for free throw shooting, how often you get to the line. So he's a really great 3-level scorer, and again, he's 6'4", has some size as well. Because, again, I think when we have this size discussion, a lot of it is focused on the front court. I think you should also kind of focus on the back court as well. Make sure that you have a size advantage on the perimeter as well, in addition to the paint. So, again, kind of intrigued by it. It seems like, again, people are pretty bullish on him potentially coming. I would assume it'll be interesting to see where he ends up fitting in the system, right? Because you think with Tyler Perkins returning, and it's probably, again, too early to speculate on this, because obviously there's other pieces that'll come and other spots that still need to be filled. But I am curious where, because he seems kind of like a shooting guard in a way, can maybe bring the ball up occasionally. But again, if we go with the Matt Hodge playing the 3 theory, maybe that pushes Tyler Perkins to the 2, which I think
it probably does.
Yeah, and then do you have Jake Fegan kind of play point guard, or do you have Tyler Perkins play point guard? Again, kind of early to speculate on it. Is DJ Wagner coming? Who knows? That's another guy that Villanova supposedly is really interested in, a talented guard from Arkansas. But I just think, the offensive stuff really screams off the page for Fegan.
And the final 4 schools that Fegan is down to: Villanova, Northwestern, Virginia, and Vanderbilt. He visited Northwestern on Monday. That visit, was obviously a big one for him. But Fegan, I agree with you, Steve. His final 12 games of the season, he averaged at least 10 points per game. He had a couple 30-point performances as well. Scored 31 points at Brown. Scored 33 points versus Dartmouth. And the beginning of the season was a little slow for him, but he really picked it up when Cornell was able to get into Ivy League play. Obviously, Cornell did make the Ivy League tournament, lost to Yale, 88-76. Eventually, that was won by the Penn Quakers. But Fegan, definitely a really good piece. Saw him yesterday. He was on the golf cart with Kevin Willard when Coach Willard had stopped by the Bone Marrow Drive with Nova Football and Coach Ferrante, and Fegan was getting a visit. We'll see how that goes. Again, it seems like Fegan's final visit was with Villanova yesterday of the 4 schools, so we'll keep an eye. If we hear any news, should be coming soon. And then, as Steve mentioned, and so did I earlier, DJ Wagner, the Arkansas transfer, he's another guard, went for a visit on April 14th here at Villanova. That was on Tuesday. Haven't heard a lot of news about Wagner since then, which I think is concerning. If you really wanted DJ Wagner here on the main line, he averaged about 7.5 points per game last season, decent in terms of assist rate, about 25 minutes per game last year as well. Camden, New Jersey native, so would be close to home for Wagner, but we'll definitely keep an eye on things there. And those are really the 2 main names right now. You have Fegan and Wagner in terms of players that have recently visited Villanova. The portal will close on April 21st, so that is on Tuesday, so a few days away. So again, we do have some more days left open in the transfer portal, and I'd imagine there'll be a lot more visits coming up. But again, the 2 players that have committed so far for Villanova, you have Devin Royal, the Ohio State transfer, and then Kwame Evans Jr., who I think, Steve, we both agree is the best transfer addition that Villanova's picked up so far. Again, not a knock against Royal, but Evans Jr., I think his skill set is very, very good. And then to talk about some of the subtractions, Steve, you have to start with the Cain Lewis, who declared for the NBA draft a few days ago, now probably about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, declared that he was going to go through that process, and then ultimately really got out of that process quickly, had entered the transfer portal at that same time, and committed to Miami. So no more Cain Lewis here on the main line, and that's shocking. I thought, and Steve, we had mentioned this yesterday on the Bone Marrow Drive broadcast when I did the show last week, I really thought that Lewis was either going to, test the waters, which I think he did. Ultimately, probably didn't find anything in terms of the NBA draft, something that he liked. But I thought there was somewhat of a chance that he would return to Villanova. I thought it was a small chance, but I think a lot of people were counting it out. I didn't necessarily count it out the whole way, but I thought it was a very, very, little chance. But goes to Miami, and there obviously was some sort of a disagreement in terms of financial resources that would be allotted for Lewis over the last few weeks. But, we did hear Lewis talk about it seemingly was something that he wanted to play in the warmer weather. I'd imagine that Miami perhaps gave him more money than Villanova did to head down there. So it's a big loss. And we talked about it last week, Steve. I'd mentioned it that I think the knock on Lewis has been over the last few months or over the last few weeks since he's entered the transfer portal. Well, he shot less than 30% as a guard. He's easily replaceable. But I think you're forgetting about the phenomenal things that Lewis did in terms of his ability to play make, the assist rate, his ability to finish in the lane, and also to Steve, I thought he made some key buckets late in games this season as well. He, as a point guard, he did everything you could ask him for. Yes, there were turnovers at times. He was a freshman, but I thought in terms of his he's very poised in terms of his attitude, controlling the tempo late in games. I thought was impressive for the most part. So this is obviously a big loss. There's a reason why Lewis had so many, you would imagine, suitors out there for him. But similar to free agency, in professional sports, Lewis ultimately, was going to go where I think the money was the most for him, but also a place that was more fitting. It seemed like when he was in San Diego, he enjoyed the warm weather, so I don't think it's a surprise that he goes down to Florida. But nonetheless, I thought it was surprising just how quickly things moved. There were some rumors attached with Lewis to Miami over the last few weeks, and that was the decision that Lewis had made. Steve, it's a big loss for Villanova. I think anybody saying that, this is easy, Villanova can replace Lewis, he wasn't a good three-point shooter, I think is an overreaction. It's a big loss for Coach Willard, and it's a big loss for the Wildcats.
It is a big loss, and it's disappointing to say the least because, again, I think we'll go a little off the cuff here. Like, what more could you have given a Caden Lewis? Think about it. You had Devin Askew coming in, who was supposedly the veteran guard leading into this year, and you assumed that he would kind of be the starting point guard to start the season. Now, he did get hurt, but then he kind of blew past his recovery timeline and was back on the floor in the season opener against BYU. And Caden Lewis got the start, got the keys to the offense right away, played pretty well, had the ball in his hands very frequently, had a very high usage rate, really seemed to enjoy his time at Villanova. And again, you said it, you can't undersell just his ability to play make, and also as a defender, he was great at stealing the ball. He just was very active in passing lanes. Obviously, in terms of getting posted up, he struggled there. He's not the most physical guy. He's kind of a skinny 6'2", 6'3" guy, but he was very twitchy and had a lot of speed to keep up with guys moving all over the place on the perimeter, and he could jump passing lanes, create opportunities on fast breaks. So you lose that in addition to, which again is probably in the minds of a lot of Villanova fans, David, the crazy layups and his elite layup package, his ability to make shots that simply other point guards can't do. And again, coming in as a 5-star, you get him after he originally committed to Kentucky and then he decommits, he comes to Villanova. It seems like he really enjoyed his time here. But to be honest, yeah, I was just a little bit deflated. I think that kind of rubbed off on the Bone Marrow broadcast a little bit, because personally, even just thinking, as we're seniors kind of outgoing, I think outside of Eric Dixon, obviously Jordan Longino, I liked his game. I think Caden Lewis was by far one of the most fun players that I've ever watched, like in my 4 years as a student, and it just his ability to make an impact on both ends of the floor and just kind of grow as the season went on. Like, he was a little bit raw and he got a lot better, and it is just a real shame that it's kind of sold to the highest bidder. It's it's college athletics, people moving around all over the place, and again, I think that's always been kind of always present in fans' minds. People are a bit kind of upset with the structure and how it feels like people are moving all over the place, and that didn't bother me a ton even last year when Villanova had to fill a lot of pieces. But just with something like this, losing Lewis, it was disappointing, because it felt like you gave him everything. I'm sure they gave him a competitive offer, and it just didn't work out. And again, we were talking about Jake Fegan earlier, right? Jake Fegan obviously I think could replace a Caden Lewis in terms of scoring in the backcourt, but just looking at his defensive stuff, it's night and day comparing him compared him to a Caden Lewis. I mean, Fegan does struggle on the defensive end, so it's rare you get those two-way impact guys, especially so young.
And that's the key for me, Steve. I mean, Lewis still has 3 years of eligibility remaining, and that's one of those foundational pieces Lewis was that you could really build around theoretically. And I know in this age of college basketball, it really doesn't ever work out like that anyway, especially when you have a player to the degree and how talented Lewis is. But it was something that I agree with you. I think it's disappointing, and we'll definitely see how the rest of the offseason shakes out. But shapes out. It's definitely something to monitor, and definitely a disappointment, I think, for a lot of fans out there. And then also you had Bryce Lindsey, who committed yesterday to Indiana on his Instagram. Won't touch on this a whole lot. Do want to get to women's basketball and some of the Bone Marrow Drive updates from yesterday, but no surprise here. I'd mentioned it last week. Out of all the players that could have entered the transfer portal from Villanova heading into next year, I thought that Lindsey was the first. And Bryce, he's bounced around through with a few different schools. Started off the season really hot in non-conference play, and then went through a stretch in December and January where he really struggled. Picked it up a little bit again in the final month or so of the season, but it just was inconsistent in Big East play. And I think the shooting potential is there. Can it be there in a power conference? We'll find out. I think consistently is the question. But really no surprise here that Lindsey committed. He'll go to a place like Indiana. Probably will have perhaps, I don't want to say less pressure on him at a school like Indiana, but maybe a little bit just with Indiana and obviously how good of a football program it now has. But for Villanova, obviously basketball is really the main focus, and Lindsey is going to head to a different school in Indiana. Were you surprised that he got that good of a deal with Indiana?
Yeah, I was surprised because there was some chatter on Villanova message boards that with Bryce Lindsey that he entered the portal, that kind of the team around him was advising him to go into the portal, and that he would be getting these very lucrative deals, and kind of the general consensus, or at least people I guess close to the situation, it's all speculative. None of this is obviously confirmed, and it could all just be nonsense at the end of the day. But with Lindsey, that the scoop on him was that he thought he'd get a really good offer, and that kind of a few days into the portal, which opened on April 7th, that he was kind of struggling to get a good offer, and people were even thinking, could he then try to return to Villanova, or transfer, but kind of a downgrade maybe outside of the high major level. So again, a little surprising if you consider it from that perspective. But again, going back to the point I should say about Caden Lewis, where again with Bryce Lindsey, right? Villanova rode with Bryce Lindsey through the difficult stretch. It'd be one thing if Bryce Lindsey at moments where
he continued to start.
Yeah,
and that was the big discussion back in January when Devin Askew was playing his best basketball this season. Kevin Willard remained at multiple press conferences for a few weeks, committed to Bryce Lindsey being in the starting lineup.
Yeah, and again, and I'm sure Coach Willard thought, of course he believed in Bryce Lindsey's ability this past season as a basketball player, and that did show up. I don't want to undersell. Again, obviously March was very terrible for Villanova. It stunk how it ended. The Georgetown loss and then the Utah State loss. But Utah State, he played really well to end the year, which is great to see. And then
he was their best player in the game against Utah State.
By far, 25 points, was electric from three. And then Georgetown kind of sneakily, I think he had like 11 or 12 points. Like he was kind of one of the only guys that felt like kind of showed up a little bit in kind of that tough double-digit loss. So I kind of thought with that, it kind of put a bow on what was kind of an up and down season for Lindsey. And I just thought the fact that, again, Coach Willard really showed by, again, keeping him in the starting lineup, in spite of the fact that Devin Askew, right, was the Big East Sixth Man of the Year, was really playing well in January and February, and Coach Willard was like, no, I'm going to keep Bryce Lindsey in the starting lineup. I think he valued, again, his contributions, but I also thought deep down, and again, we'll never truly know, he probably thought, this will be good because then I want him back next year, and that's why he was preaching retention, and again, how do you get rewarded for that, right? Of course, it's his choice, but it just stinks again to see him him leave, because I really think that, again, with Lewis and Lindsay, if they were able to stay and have a full off season where you can kind of work in the months of April, May before the new team is formed and you start in June, July, I think that just gets you ahead of some of these other teams that just, again, completely overhaul their rosters year in and year out.
So Lindsay is going to Indiana, Cain Lewis to Miami. Two of the starting guards for Villanova depart. And that's the new age of college basketball, seemingly. So the other players that are in the portal, Braden Pierce, he had a visit with St. Joe's about a week ago. We'll keep an update on that. Zion Stanford, really hasn't been any news on that front in terms of Zion. Same thing with Tafari Gapari, but both players are in the portal. Nico Onyekwe also in the portal. He has all 4 years of eligibility remaining. Malcolm Flaggs entered the portal. That was reported a few days ago. Duke Brennan, who is waiting for that potential extra year of eligibility.
Yeah.
We'll see if he gets that with the 5-year rule. Maybe a few years down the line. This year, we'll find out. But I do believe that's a long shot. That's a stretch for Brennan. And then also, in terms of the additions, again, just a reminder, Kwame Evans Jr., Devin Royal. And then yesterday, we'll end things here in the men's basketball segment with Chris Jeffrey announcing that he would enter the transfer portal. And this was a big bummer for Villanova because Kevin Willard, again, similar to Bryce Lindsay, was very high praised. I think he praised Jeffrey perhaps more than any player, maybe other than Tyler Perkins this season. Jeffrey, who Kevin Willard always said was a great practice player. And there was a quote where Willard had mentioned that Jeffrey would get rewarded for his not taking a red shirt year. Remember, Jeffrey had right knee surgery back in December, back in the early part of the winter, and he could have redshirted. Instead, he continued to practice with the team when he got healthy and ultimately played, gave up that year. He could have potentially redshirted. And Willard had a quote at a press conference, Jeffrey is an extreme hard worker, one of the best practice players, him and Devin Askew, that Willard has ever had, and said that he would get rewarded. And you thought that Jeffrey may have more of a role, fully healthy heading into the season. Villanova, seemingly to me, Steve, that would elude the fact that maybe Willard feels really good about Fegan coming to Villanova. And another couple guards, or at least one other guard, to push Jeffrey down, if you will, from potentially getting that spot. But I really like Chris Jeffrey. I thought that was one of the biggest surprises. And other than Cain Lewis, I think Jeffrey is the other player that I was really disappointed in losing.
I was disappointed as well because, again, with Chris Jeffrey, there's another name where if you just stay at least one more year, give the Coach Willard rebuild at least just one more year to kind of manifest and materialize itself a little bit more, I believe a player like Jeffrey could have taken a bit of a leap because, again, you look at just some of his limited sample size numbers again, and again, he only played about 13% of the minutes, but with Bart Torvik, it's a bunch of green on his page, and again, obviously you have to take a grain of salt with all that, but again, a good steal rate, again, something that you may not get with somebody like Jake Fegan, a pretty solid assist rate, low turnover rate, defensive box plus minus 5.5, so again, what that's saying is that basically on average, if Bart Torvik makes some adjustments, Villanova's defense is about 5 to 6 points better when Chris Jeffrey's on the floor. Again, small sample size, we get
it's not a surprise.
But and it makes sense just looking at his frame. He's 6'3", he's long, he's lengthy, and he has a bit of size to him. That was something that really when Lewis and Jeffrey, again, were on the team together last year, and obviously they're not now. Lewis was kind of the speedster, and then Jeffrey was more the bulldozer that could kind of really mow you down, and obviously he had some speed to him as well, but his ability to kind of move guys out of the way and kind of throw his shoulder into the body of opposing defenders. I thought he was pretty good at that. Again, with the limited time that he had, decent 2-point shooter, decent free throw shooter, but again, yet another name where you're just left wondering kind of what could have been, right? So, and again, just tracking the portal again, and this isn't Coach Willard's fault. I'm not trying to put it on the Villanova general manager, Baker Dunleavy, or the people trying to keep Villanova players from staying, or even blaming the players. It's more just the system in general. But this was promised to be kind of a retention year where you're trying to build on really that main core. And obviously you have Tyler Perkins and Matt Hodge coming back. Who knows with Malachi Palmer, and obviously Askew and Brennan are out of eligibility. But as of right now, let's just assume Duke Brennan doesn't come back. You may only have 3 returning guys out of about 11 or 12. It's just crazy. So, we'll kind of see how the future landscape shapes out. But, Villanova's doing a good job in the portal so far, which is a positive. They're not discouraged, but, it's a full-time gig. The off-season, you can't sleep at all. You got to always be scouting players and things like that.
And there have been a lot of players that have been connected to Villanova,
Yeah.
which I think is a good sign, especially after last season. And so Perkins and Hodge are officially returning. Unknown about Malachi Palmer. Hasn't been anything announced yet. It seems like Malachi will return. We'll see if that is the case. We'll take a break here on Villanova Sports Talk. Again, stay up to date with everything in the transfer portal right here on WXVU on Villanova Sports Talk every Thursday from 11 a.m. to noon. When we come back, we'll talk about Villanova women's basketball. Some big breaking news from Coach Dillon yesterday on the Bone Marrow Drive broadcast. We'll talk about that and much more here on WXVU, V891, The Roar. Villanova Sports Talk rolls along here on this Thursday morning. Just about 20 minutes left to go on the show. As always, you can vote on our poll questions on my Twitter at WXVU. David asked 3 poll questions there, and also the Bone Marrow Drive interviews will be posted throughout the next few days. Steve, David Szczepanski, Steve, and Cain with you. Let's transition to Villanova women's basketball. And unlike the men's basketball team, much more quiet on the women's basketball side of things. But that's not a bad thing because there are a lot of players returning. And yesterday we'll begin with the breaking news from Denise Dillon on our Bone Marrow Drive broadcast that Jasmine Bascoe will officially return to Villanova next season. Now, we did see Jasmine yesterday, and it seemed like that she did have some sort of a brace on her leg area. So we're not 100% sure about that. Did see her at the Bone Marrow Drive yesterday. But great news that Bascoe was returning. She averaged 19 points per game. She's one of the best players in the Big East. And I said this to Coach Dillon yesterday when we were on air. It's very rare that you see a player like Bascoe not just stay at Villanova, but be as committed as she is. I mean, when you talk about an ambassador for the Villanova community, Jasmine Bascoe is up there in terms of the top player, student athlete ambassadors that are out there. And she's just a junior. She just finished her sophomore campaign, and she got better last year, Steve. I think that sometimes maybe that's not talked about a whole lot because the beginning of the season for Bascoe was a little inefficient, right? She had some of those games where she was taking a lot of shots, was still picking up double digits in terms of points, but maybe wasn't as efficient as you would like her to be. But when it's all said and done, Steve, she could be she is going to be one of, but she could be right up there with Maddie Siegrist in a lot of records, especially if there's a chance for a 5th year of eligibility or anything like that. Obviously, I would imagine Bascoe is looking not now, but down the road at the WNBA, or at least continuing her career professionally past college. But Bascoe, she has a chance to break a lot of records, and it's great to have her back. Like I said, in addition to what she does on the court, what she does off the court, I think is just as important. Coach Dillon talked about that yesterday. And it is, I mentioned this to Coach Dillon yesterday as well, but it's strange because Bascoe, in this day of college basketball, we're just talking about with men's basketball and that side of the transfer portal, you have to announce when players are officially coming back at this point. Star players, when they're officially coming back. Like a Tyler Perkins, a Matt Hodge, like the men's basketball team social media did. And Bascoe is a similar thing. You have to ask those questions, even though it may seem obvious, because there is always that chance that players could enter the portal. So Bascoe officially is returning. And that really was the million-dollar question, Steve. That was what a lot of people wanted to know, and she's a big part of it. The team is really built around her. So in terms of the returners and where things stand, you have Elise Bender, Brooke Bender, Jasmine Bascoe, Danny Cisaretti, Kennedy Henry, Kelsey Jones, Bryn McCary, and Rachel Wirtz all appear to be returning. It's officially confirmed that Bascoe will be back. Kennedy Henry will officially be back. In terms of the other players, they haven't entered the portal yet. It seems like Brooke Bender will be back. I would imagine that all those players are staying at Villanova next season. The only player that's in the portal is MD Natumbu, and she entered very early in the transfer portal. So, Steve, your thoughts on Bascoe returning? I think it's great, but also just in general, the high retention rate from Coach Dillon and her staff.
It speaks to what Denise Dillon has built, and she's done such a good job at racking up 20-plus win seasons, 25-plus win seasons in some cases, like it's nothing, making the NCAA tournament, and then in the years that they don't make it, right, the past few years where they were a good team, maybe not the best team, fell just short of making the NCAA tournament, while other teams would kind of sulk and pout and think that they're too good for the WBIT. Villanova instead not only plays in the WBIT but gets, to your retention point, gets a lot of players kind of in that postseason tournament that some could interpret as maybe a little bit less meaningful as the NCAA tournament. You get all those players in previous years. Think of Lucy Olson, Christina Dalsay, some of those players to play in the WBIT and then do really well. And I think that just spoke to just through the years how a lot of these players have loved playing for Coach Dillon and for this Villanova women's basketball program. So, get a lot of credit goes to them. And yeah, in terms of Jasmine Bascoe, again, if you've had just a pulse on Villanova women's basketball, you don't really need much on how big it is that she's returning. Really, besides the shooting, that's really the big key. She wasn't the most efficient, but again, had a very high usage rate. Good stealer of the ball, top 10 in assist rate among scoring point guards in the country according to Bart Torvik, top 40 in box plus minus. She was just so solid in so many different ways. And again, you mentioned it, there were some ups, there were some downs, but by and large, she really made a meaningful impact on both ends of the floor. And obviously Kennedy Henry as well is a great addition too. Again, her steal rate was through the roof, almost 5%. And again, not a lot of green on her Bart Torvik page, but also not a lot of red. So, which I think is good for a freshman. There's not a ton of glaring weaknesses besides getting to the free throw line. But the women's team, I think as a whole, maybe struggled with that, and maybe the shooting could improve. But 2-point shooting, free throw shooting, the rebounding, the assist stuff, the turnovers, blocking shots. She was solid in a lot of those areas. Could obviously improve. Right, those a lot of those stats I rattled off, it's not like she excelled in a ton of them, but the fact that she wasn't really bad in any of those categories, I think just speaks to, again, just how good she could be with another year under Denise Dillon. So it's exciting.
And Henry was their best defender a season ago as well.
Yeah.
And she's just a freshman. She has 3 years of eligibility remaining, so she will be back. Bryn McCary coming back, I think, is also key. And is she healthy? Right? This was her first really full season being healthy. You would obviously love to have her back for the next season, but also to stay healthy because she was a big contributor, especially early on in the season when Bascoe had struggled a little bit in terms of just efficiency and consistency. But Bascoe really picked it up, and she did make a big step forward in the second half of the season, even from her freshman campaign. And then the other big news, we talked about Natumbu entering the transfer portal. She didn't play a whole lot. She has 3 years of eligibility remaining. But Anna Foley was the big addition for Villanova, and this was announced a couple days ago, coming in from Quinnipiac. Coach Dillon yesterday had talked about Foley. She's a 6'3" forward center, which is key because you're losing Danae Carter, Kylie Watson, who were staples of this past team that made it to March Madness for the first time since 2022, 2023. And Foley had a good season once again for Quinnipiac, and she averaged double digits. Obviously she's got some size, she's got some experience, which I think is key. She averaged almost 6 rebounds per game, similar to Danae Carter's numbers. She averaged about 3 assists per game, a really good field goal shooter, about 49% from the field. So that is impressive. And Steve, throughout her career, she's even been a better rebounder than 5.5 rebounds per game. She rebounded 7 rebounds per game back in 2023-24, her freshman season. Now, also something to note is that she didn't start a whole lot this year for Quinnipiac. She actually came off the bench, so she started in she played in 34 games. She started in just 5 of them. She also averaged the least amount of minutes in her career, just 22 per game, so that's also something to monitor, to where you could take a look at that as maybe a good thing, but also a bad thing. It's a good thing in the sense that maybe her numbers could even increase if she's a starter. The bad thing is maybe there was a reason Quinnipiac didn't put her in the starting lineup, but still, I mean, her numbers are good. I think her metrics are solid, so Coach Dillon really praised Foley. She brings size to a front court that desperately needed it, similar to the men's basketball team. So I like the addition of Foley, but Steve, overall, this is a big offseason for Villanova women's basketball. I mean, they have to hit a home run at this point in the offseason, and this is a team that's going to be ranked in the top 25, it appears, heading into next season. They made a big step forward, getting back to March Madness for the first time since 2022-23, first time with Jasmine Bascoe. But now, Steve, I think the expectations are raised, and this is a huge offseason. You bring in Foley, talked about how good Coach Dillon has been in her career retaining players. I think now it's time for that big swing in the transfer portal. I know that sometimes Big East women's basketball doesn't get a whole lot of great transfers, just with kind of the lopsidedness of the conference at times, in the women's basketball lens of things. But this is a big offseason. It's a good start with Foley, good start, a great start with all the retention. But I hope there are still some more pieces left to come for Coach Dillon and the Wildcats.
I agree. And again, Foley, you could argue in terms of mid-major players, quietly one of the best forwards in all of mid-major women's college basketball this past season. You mentioned it, over 11 points per game. In terms of wing guards in the portal, so again, this is, with the portal, so not necessarily the entire country, but in terms of what Villanova was looking for in terms of in terms of wing forwards, second best assist rate among wing forwards in the country in the portal, top 20 in block percentage, 14th in defensive box plus minus. She is very solid in terms of, again, just swatting shots, being a big body in the interior. Again, I think that's a good point with no Watson, no Ryan Allen, no Danae Carter, Weldy and Grant, too, even further down the bench. They're out of eligibility. And, again, you have Cesaretti coming back, but she kind of plays a little bit more on the perimeter with Foley. You get somebody who's on the inside and, again, can also steal the basketball at a pretty decent rate. So, again, a pretty solid addition. Again, I think the whole assist rate thing, I think, is what really speaks volumes for me, because you mentioned it, she is a forward. You don't expect her to be a good passer of the basketball, and you kind of expect more of the stats that I rattled off earlier about the block percentage, and, okay, she's a good defender in terms of box plus minus, and maybe she steals the ball a little bit, and, and of course it makes sense. Maybe the one thing that maybe she needs to improve on is the three-point shooting, because she kind of lives in the paint. But I just think the assist rate being that solid, I think it just adds another dimension to her game, because then she's on the inside, and if you're an opposing team defending her on a post up, it's not a foregone conclusion that she's just going to go up and shoot it herself. She has the vision to find a cutting, maybe Jasmine Bascoe or Kennedy Henry. It's good to say that, since those players will be back. So it kind of just adds another dimension to this already very complex Villanova offense, and again, it just adds a lot of versatility. So I'm thrilled with the addition, but I agree, they got to continue to add. I know Alexis Ebers is coming in from Archbishop Carroll.
Yep.
So that'll be interesting. Another freshman, first team All-State, state champion. So with 4 years of eligibility, she'll be a guard. So, but again, more work to be done for Villanova, but obviously a good start there.
And Ebers could start. I think there's a chance. Coach Dillon spoke highly about her yesterday as well. So those are the updates with the women's basketball side of things. Again, Foley, the big addition to this point for Villanova. She does get into foul trouble at times, so we'll monitor that. But Foley, a good start for Villanova. Obviously, Bascoe coming back is phenomenal news, quite possibly the best news you could hear. So great to see that. And we'll keep an eye on MD Natumbu, Villanova. She's the only player that has entered the transfer portal this point for women's basketball side of things. See, before we get to the poll questions, as a recap for the Bone Marrow Drive broadcast yesterday, some Nova football news. Matt O'Connor, former quarterback, Narberth native here at Villanova, former quarterback here at Villanova from our freshman season. He was on that 2022 team with Connor Watkins. He is now the wide receivers coach for Villanova. So Nate Pagan, who had left for an opportunity with the Kansas City Chiefs to be one of their quality control coaches. So that's a big opportunity, obviously, for him. Pagan has been with the wide receivers for pretty much the last decade, 9 seasons. Now Matt O'Connor will step in, also see some other roles in terms of the offense, but will mainly be the wide receivers coach. So that was some Nova football news from yesterday, and getting ready for the August 29th season opener against William and Mary. Steve, it's time for our poll questions. You can vote on my Twitter at WXVU David S. First poll question: which Villanova transfer portal edition are you most looking forward to seeing play on the men's basketball side of things? Devin Royal or Kwame Evans Jr.?
I think Kwame Evans Jr., but it's very close. I just think him being, again, a top 3 power conference stretch 4 guy in the portal, Villanova getting him, a former 5-star. People are talking about him going to the NBA when he came out of high school and began his college career, and obviously things have changed there. This will be his final year of eligibility, but again, pretty close. I don't want to undersell what Royal will bring to this front court as well, but I think Evans Jr., and again, 9th and 12th in offensive and defensive box plus minus, that kind of speaks for itself, and his ability to shoot the 2, get to the free throw line. I just think there's a little bit more two-way upside with Evans.
I alluded to my answer earlier as well. It's the same answer, Kwame Evans Jr. I agree with your points. I think the skill set is there for Evans Evans Jr. I'm excited to see him on most likely a winning team as well. Oregon last year didn't play all that well. That will be my answer. Evans Jr. receiving 85% of the vote, Royal with the other 15%. On a scale of 1 to 5, how happy are you with Villanova men's basketball's offseason? 1 being the least happy, 1 to 2, which are lumped together as one answer, 3, which is neutral, 4 or 5. Steve?
I would say 3 because I'm happy with the Evans edition. The Royal edition's good too. I'm intrigued by potentially Jake Fegan. I feel pretty good.
We might hear today on Fegan.
Yeah.
Maybe tonight, some point in time. Again, Villanova in the list of the final 4 schools.
Yeah, and just what he would bring offensively, but again, and this shouldn't come as a surprise. Again, if you'd have been following along with the show, and just I think our both of our thoughts just being a bit soured, with the transfer portal stuff, and I'm trying not to make it sound like old man yells at cloud, and it's kind of been like this for a while, and people may say, oh well, why now? Are you kind of, a bit sour about it? I think it's just this year you were promised kind of a full core, and you're getting it somewhat back with Perkins and Hodge. You don't want to discount it. Maybe Malachi Palmer comes back, but again, you only have potentially 3 guys coming back, and so many guys hitting the portal, and again, the players obviously have the right to do it. And Villanova, I think they did a good job. They supposedly, again, rumors, not confirmed, offered Lewis a decent amount. Bryce Lindsey, I think they wanted him to stay, and it is what it is. I just think, and again, comes as a shocker, just the system needs some sort of overhaul, and hopefully we get that in the next few years.
We're on sync today. I'll say neutral as well, and my reasoning similar, but I'm happy with Evans Jr., I'm happy with Royal, but I ultimately want to see what's more left to go, and not, that may be the easy answer out in terms of neutral at that 3 spot, but it's been good that Villanova's been connected to a lot of players. I think Fegan would make that a 4 for me, 3.5, 4, but a lot of work still left to do, really on both sides of the basketball teams. Poll question 3, which returning player on Villanova's basketball teams are you most excited to be back? This was the closest poll of them all. Oh, by the way, on the last poll, 52% of the voters said neutral, 28% saying 4, and 20% saying not very happy, 1 to 2. Which returning player on Villanova's basketball teams are you most excited to be back? Tyler Perkins, Jasmine Bascoe, Matt Hodge, or Kennedy Henry? This is the closest poll of them all. Steve, where do you fall?
I voted Jasmine Bascoe. I just think she means so much to the Villanova women's team, not just on what she does on the floor, right? Talked about how great of a two-way player she is, scoring the ball, assisting the ball, and then sealing the ball on the other end. But just off the floor, you mentioned it. Now this is the second off season. In my mind, David, I was kind of biting my fingernails a little bit nervous. I think last off season, thinking, oh, she had a great year. She may leave, because just think of all the schools that are probably dying to have her and all the offers that she probably has on the table because she's a phenomenal basketball player. Then for her to say, I'm going to run it back with Villanova another year, plays pretty well once again, has some ups and downs, still definitely the best player on the team, and then for her to then go through it again, and I kind of had the same thought, like, oh, maybe this is the year. Maybe she's like, oh, well, I'm getting this great offer, and maybe I get even more at my disposal at another school. She decides to come back again. So that's really awesome stuff. And again, I think retention is key. And again, that's going to allow her to just get even better, which sounds crazy to say when you're talking about Jasmine Bascoe. So
I'm also going to say Bascoe for very similar points to what you mentioned. She is the heart and soul of the Villanova women's basketball team. They really have to have her back, and they do, and that's great. Who do you think received the most votes?
Probably Tyler Perkins.
And how
I
much?
know there's, I'll say it's not like a majority. What is it? A plurality of the votes? Because there's 4. I think it's like it's probably in the 40s. I'd say
48%.
Okay.
And don't get me wrong,
So
Perkins
close to a
coming back
majority.
is huge.
Yeah.
But I think Bascoe, and now it's actually ticked up to 50%. From some votes coming in here,
Yeah.
but Bascoe, she just means so much to this team.
Yeah, well, I mean, people love Tyler Perkins. There's
and so do I.
accounts.
I mean,
Yeah.
we had a Tyler Perkins day on this show,
and there's accounts on Instagram. This is often like Tyler Perkins worshiper. There's people that just
Don't get me wrong,
that love the guy.
Perkins
so,
coming
he's
back
fun.
is huge for this team. I think, and again, the question is not who is the most important player to come back, which
Yeah.
maybe I took it as, even though I wrote the question. But excited to be back, Perkins. I understand it, and I definitely agree. 50% of the voters saying Perkins. Do you think Bascoe was second?
Yes, I think she was second, but I don't
Kennedy
think it was
Henry,
that close.
24%.
Wow.
In second.
Well, good for
Bascoe at
Kennedy
16%, and Matt Hodge, 11%, or well, 10.5%. But yeah, Henry is great coming back too. 24%.
Yeah.
And she's just a freshman. I think her defensive skills are really impressive, and we'll see how that translates and carries over to the following season. But that was a little surprising. I was a little surprised about how overwhelming the vote was for Perkins, even though I'm very glad to have him back. He's obviously a fantastic basketball player, Big East most improved player. Surprised that Henry received more votes than Bascoe.
I guess thinking about it now, because Bascoe did return once, maybe.
So maybe people weren't as shocked.
People were more confident. Okay, another portal. She did return once. Maybe she returns again. While with Henry, you don't know. There's this unknown. Yeah, she was just a freshman, so maybe people were more pleasantly surprised.
And teams, especially for good defensive players, and her steal rate as just a freshman, you would imagine the payday maybe a little bit heavier there, a little bit more. So
she's she's super solid. Again, just in terms of her defensive stats. Even just looking now. 9th in defensive box plus minus among combo guards. So that's
crazy.
Super, super solid.
Well, that will do it. An action-packed episode of Villanova Sports Talk here on WXVU. We'll be back 1 week from today. Hopefully we're talking about Jake Fegan. Do we have Jake Fegan Day next Thursday if things go well? I think we have to reserve it. That was only a Tyler Perkins honor to this point. We'll see what happens. But we'll be back next Thursday, April 23rd from 11 a.m. to noon right here on WXVU. Again, with the Bone Marrow Drive broadcast interviews yesterday, we interviewed Eric Crodell, Father Peter, Mark Ferrante, Andy Talley, Denise Dillon. Those interviews will be posted on my YouTube channel, David Szczepanski Broadcasting, later throughout the week. The interview with Coach Ferrante and Coach Talley is already now available. And I just want to thank everybody for their support. You can follow me on Twitter at WXVUDavidS. And Steven and I will see you next week, again, right here on WXVU from 11 a.m. to noon on April 23rd. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, Nova Nation. And as always, go Cats!